Welcome to the Albany Book Festival online, presented by the New York State Writers Institute at the University at Albany. You can learn more about the festival and find direct links to independent booksellers at our festival webpage, albanybookfestival.com. Follow us on social media and hear from more videos from the Writers Institute.
Good evening and welcome. Thank you for coming this evening. It's so nice to see you all live and in person. This is a very special ceremony. My name is Paul Grondahl. I'm the director of the New York State Writers Institute at the University at Albany. I have a strong emotion, a feeling tonight is gratitude. Immense gratitude that we can be together for this really wonderful evening. At this point, I'd like to acknowledge that the University at Albany stands on traditional Mohawk, Haudenosaunee, and Stockbridge-Munsee Band of Mohican Nation lands. A land acknowledgement is part of the process that helps us understand what brought us to reside on the land and to seek to understand our place within that history. Mohawk, Mohican, and other indigenous people are part of our community here at UAlbany today, and a land acknowledgement helps us recognize the continuing importance of indigenous issues and indigenous rights in our community. Thank you. We're gathered here tonight to honor three exceptional authors and to formally induct the new state author and state poet. We've proudly carried out this unique assignment every 2 years since 1986. This is our 13th induction ceremony. No other college or university in the nation has a state mandate to carry out this vital role, and we cherish it. Tonight, we celebrate the great literary tradition in the city of Albany, at this university, and all across the great state of New York. All these literary strands come together in the New York State Writers Institute, established by our founder and guiding spirit, who's here with us tonight. Please give a warm round of applause for William Kennedy. We'll be hearing more about other special guests here tonight. And as you follow along in your program, please take a moment to read the names of our major sponsors of this event, which is the kickoff to our 4th annual Albany Book Festival. Please give a warm round of applause for our sponsors. So my role tonight is a simple one: stage manager, keep people coming up and off the stage, keep us on pace, and hopefully keep our schedule to about an hour. So I do need to remind you that COVID-19 protocols require you to wear your face mask throughout the program during the book signing, which will be out in the Great Hall afterwards. I got to take mine off because if you're speaking at the podium, you have special dispensation because we're socially distanced. So people at the microphone, the podium, can remove those, which I've done, and we appreciate your compliance on that. I would add and offer a quote from Walt Whitman, for whom our state poet citation of merit is named. Whitman writes, quote, "Happiness, not in another place, but this place. Not for another hour, but this hour. So let us begin our golden hour of literary happiness on this special night." Please join me in welcoming to the stage for introductory remarks, University at Albany President, Dr. Avidan Rodriguez.
Thank you. I assume I have special dispensation as well, so I'll take my mask off. Thank you so very much, Paul. And to everyone here this evening, muy buenas noches. Good evening to each and every one of you. It is simply delightful to be able to gather together in person to celebrate and to recognize some distinguished authors here in the state of New York as part of this celebration that we're doing today. First of all, I also want to recognize some very special friends who are with us here this evening. Our mayor of the city of Albany, Kathy Sheehan and her husband, Bob Sheehan. Welcome. Mayor, thank you so very much for everything that you do for and on behalf of the city of Albany. Thank you for your strong partnership with the University at Albany and your strong and dedicated commitment to higher education. We sincerely appreciate everything that you do. So thank you. And of course, we are also extremely pleased to welcome the Chancellor of the SUNY system, Jim Malatras. Thank you, Jim, for being with us here. And thank you for all your work that you're doing throughout the SUNY system and going back and forth between 64 colleges and universities throughout the great state of New York. That is why he is always on roller skates. So, and the Chancellor will preside over the induction today of our incoming state author and our state poet. Again, thank you all so very much for being with us this evening to celebrate these great authors. Words really cannot express how excited I am that we have gathered here tonight on the eve of the 4th annual Albany Book Festival. So we strongly encourage you to join us tomorrow. Supposed to be a great day, great events, great writers, great activities. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. This event would have ordinarily taken place 1 year ago, but as we all know, these are not ordinary times. Fortunately, Colson Whitehead and Alicia Ostreicher graciously agreed to serve an additional year as state author and state poet. And we thank them for their excellent service to the state, to the university, and to the New York State Writers Institute. Toni Morrison, the renowned Pulitzer Prize-winning author and former UAlbany faculty member, once wrote this, and I quote, "A writer's life and work are not a gift to mankind. They are its necessity." This sentiment speaks to UAlbany's commitment to the New York State Writers Institute, because we understand that great writers and great writing are essential elements of not only higher education, but also of the well-being of the human spirit. The Writers Institute and the state author and state poet designations also represent significant points of pride for the University at Albany. Today is emblematic of the critical conversations that are taking place on our campuses and in our communities, thanks to the Writers Institute leadership and vision. And so I want to take this opportunity to really thank Paul Grondahl and his team for their great leadership and for everything that they do to create the spaces and the opportunities to have these very engaging conversations. So can we please give Paul and his staff a round of applause? You know, this was indeed very challenging 18 months. The pandemic is still not over. That's why you're all wearing masks. But the Writers Institute provided seamlessly transitioned to a robust, remote, and excellent programs, which generated tremendous participation, both locally, nationally, and globally. These events have helped us stay connected and engage in conversations about important ideas, about history, about art, about culture and politics, and so much more. And these conversations attracted people of all backgrounds, all cultures, all interests, and all ages, reaching far beyond the university to the wider community. Like all Writers Institute's work, tonight is an expression of the University at Albany's strategic priority of engagement and service. And this is truly one of the reasons why the University at Albany was designated with the Carnegie Classification for Community Engagement, of which we are very proud of. And Paul already mentioned it, but I need to highlight this, right? The University at Albany is also the only institution of higher education across the United States that is empowered to name a state author and a state poet by mandate of the New York State Legislature and by proclamation of the governor. And we are so very proud to have that honor. And you should also know that the two juries that chose the state author and state poet are composed of authors of great accomplishment and national renown, along with a number of University at Albany undergraduate students, as well as faculty and alumni. And I am proud to say that our new laureates reflect our university's values and ideals, and our commitment to excellence, as well as to our core priority of diversity and inclusion. You're going to hear much more about them very shortly, but Edith, Akhtar, and Willie Perdomo, felicidades, congratulations. Congratulations and thank you for stepping into these critical roles. And I truly can't help myself, right? But as someone who is from a Puerto Rican background, who was born in Puerto Rico, grew up between Puerto Rico and the United States, specifically the Bronx, I am so enthusiastic and elated that Willie Perdomo is also a fellow Boricua. So congratulations on that honor as well. And for those of you that don't know, Boricua is a term that we use to describe ourselves as Puerto Ricans, right, as well. So thank you and congratulations to both of you for this great accomplishment. And let me also congratulate Daniel Cheryl, our inaugural winner of the Bruce Piasecki and Andrea Masters Award on Business and Society Writing. And on behalf of the entire University at Albany, once again, my gratitude goes to each and every one of you for showing up here tonight, for joining us to celebrate these great accomplishments and to show that we are one community growing and strong. So thank you for everything that you have done and everything that you will continue to do for the University at Albany and for our communities. Once again, thank you so much. Muchísimas gracias. Paul.
Thank you so much, President Rodriguez. Now to present the inaugural Bruce Piasecki and Andrea Masters Award on Business and Society Writing, please welcome to the stage professor, poet, novelist, biographer, screenwriter, and critic, he does them all, Jay Perini.
Thank you very much, Paul, and really lovely to be here with you all today, especially with my friends Bruce and Andrea, who invited me to come along tonight. It's my special privilege tonight to be able to introduce our winner of the first recipient of this award, Daniel Cheryl, who's won the Bruce Piasecki and Andrea Masters Award on Business and Social Writing, Society Writing. He's the author of the recent wonderful memoir with a strong climate change argument, Warmth, which has a subtitle, Coming of Age in a Time at the End of the World. It's a very powerful book. Daniel, in this book, links a host of environmental problems into one category, which he calls the problem. He talks about rising tides, deforestation, the loss of whole species, pollution of sea and air and land, melting ice caps, shoreline erosion, hurricanes, and he links all of these issues and so many more to the deeper problems of racism and class warfare in the world. He makes us think about our role in all of these problems and the problem. which is the problem is a kind of enveloping overall darkness as well. And he forces us to make connections. When we invest, for example, or allow our institutions to invest in fossil fuel companies, we're promoting changes in the environment that will fall most quickly and massively on the heads of poor people in places that are often out of our immediate view. The form of Daniel's polemic is a conventional one. It's a series of letters to an unborn child of his, say, down the road. It's quite unlike many of the books we read about climate change, which are so full of statistics and bar graphs and are very difficult to read in that sense. Instead, Daniel has chosen to sort of forego all of that kind of detailed argument and argue with his heart, with his feelings, to make us feel the situation of global devastation. Daniel has had considerable success so far in helping to move the needle on climate change. It all began when he was a student at Brown. He became an activist. He spent several years organizing in New York, working for New York Renews, which was a statewide coalition aimed at reducing carbon emissions and promoting key legislation on this subject, which he was very successful in helping to move forward. He's led a campaign to convince the legislature in this very city to pass landmark issue legislation on climate justice, lobbying for renewable sources of energy with protections, especially for low-income communities. And I think in this work, Daniel reveals a broad vision, and he's making connections everywhere in this book. Well, I admire the work that Daniel Cheryl has done in this work and as a climate activist, and which I strongly recommend you to read, by the way. And it's ultimately his whole calling is a bold call to action on climate change. We can't, as he says, put our head in the sands anymore, even if we try to. The problem, as he calls it, just isn't going away. So this reward is, I think, apt, recognizing a young leader and ideas from a generation that's only now coming into its own. I suspect that Daniel Cheryl has many books in him yet, and many miles as an activist to go before he sleeps or even allows himself to sleep. As I've said, it's my great honor to introduce Daniel tonight as the recipient of this award. So let's have a round of applause for Daniel Cheryl.
Just want to say thank you to Bruce and Andrea, to Jay and Paul, to William Kennedy, my father's favorite author. He gave me Ironweed at age 8. It was too early, but it's an incredible novel. I'm just sincerely grateful to be here, to have this lovely dinner, these mums on this table, all these many astonishingly talented writers who are now suddenly and intimidatingly embodied at a dinner party, but have existed for many years as names on my shelf. But it also feels there's a deep strangeness inherent in accepting this award, because it feels like I'm being congratulated for painting a stirring portrait of a truck that's barreling down on all of us. And it usually feels less important to celebrate the picture than to acknowledge the truck. And I think this is the supreme balancing act of life under climate change. On the one hand, we can't eschew the ordinary, the human rituals, the human processes. We cannot let hold of their beauty and their ordinariness. But on the other hand, we can't be seduced by the mundane into forgetting that on its current trajectory, all of this is headed off a cliff. In other words, we're being asked to live on a tightrope between blind optimism and crushing despair, a tightrope that I would refer to as reality. And it's a difficult place to live, reality, especially in a time when storms are worsening and wildfires are spreading. but I wrote this book expressly to cling on to it and to try my best to engender an honest emotional encounter with the unabsorbable enormity of the climate crisis. The famous Catholic activist Daniel Berrigan once said of the other famous Catholic activist, Dorothy Day, that she lived as if the truth were true. And I love that quote, and this is what I've tried to do in this book, but it's so hard. It's really hard. And it's an asymptotic goal, but I've found that the attempt makes two vital things possible for me. Politics on the one hand, and hope on the other. By politics, I mean being rigorously clear-eyed about the players and the stakes. I'm sort of bizarrely being given an award for business writing. I don't really know the word business. I don't really always know what it means, but I do know that a large swath of the American business community right now, from Apple to Exxon, are doing their level best to whittle down and or destroy the $3.5 trillion reconciliation package that is right now on a knife's edge in our Congress and represents, by an order of magnitude, the most important climate legislation in the history of our country. And probably the best path to salvation for my generation. So for me, living reality and living with politics means refusing to look away from that evil and to decide that you will not tolerate it. By hope, I think I mean this: that many of the things we love most are in jeopardy, are in dire jeopardy, and that we do not know how this will all play out. And that finally, it is within our power to shape the outcome. And it is the marshaling of that power that is the highest enactment of our love. And so that's what I tried to do with warmth. I've done it inadequately, but I've done my level best. And I appreciate being recognized here. And I'd also encourage all of you, the most important legislation possibly of the century is on a knife's edge right now. If you haven't called your congressperson already, I urge you to do so. This is incredibly important. And thus my inelegant attempt to live a life of politics on the one hand and art on the other, they always seem in contradistinction, but I've tried to merge them here, and I appreciate the opportunity to do so. Anyway, thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Dan, for those inspiring, challenging words and your vital, passionate work as a writer and combating climate change. We're grateful tonight to have presiding over our formal state author and state poet induction ceremony, a 3-degree UAlbany alumnus and the 14th Chancellor of the State University of New York. Please welcome to the stage SUNY Chancellor, Dr. Jim Malatras.
Thank you so much, Paul. First, let's give Paul Grondahl a big round of applause. He is a true treasure. He knows how to get insightful writing about character, and that's an important quality in life these days. So thank you, Paul, and thank you to President Rodriguez. I wish I was here when he was president. It would have been harder for me. Maybe it took me longer to get my degree, so let's give him a big round of applause. I'm itching for an honorary degree. I want 4 degrees from the University of Albany. And thanks so much to all of you, readers, writers, teachers, students, book lovers, people who treasure writing and great thinking. It's my pleasure to be here at the University of Albany, one of the Empire State's great centers of learning. And it's a great pleasure to be here at the home of the New York State Writers Institute, a crossroads on the map of literature, a place where so many of the world's most acclaimed authors and poets have come to pay tribute to art of the written word. On behalf of the State University of New York system, one of the finest public university systems on earth, I would say the finest public system on earth, On behalf of New York's governor and the state legislature, and on behalf of the people of the great state of New York, I am honored to bestow the awards for the state's literary laureates, the state poet and state author for 2021 and 2023. The state poet will receive the Walt Whitman Citation of Merit for poetry, and the state author will receive the Edith Wharton Citation for Merit for fiction. As we honor the achievements of our two laureates, let us also celebrate the vitality of the literary arts in New York State. Our state claims a particularly rich literary past and present. New York has been home to such literary giants as Ralph Ellison, Herman Melville, Toni Morrison, Langston Hughes, Miguel Pinero, Zora Neale Hurston, Allen Ginsberg, and one of my all-time favorites, James Baldwin. And the founder of the New York State Writers Institute and proud Albany native, William Kennedy. Let's give him another big round of applause. I was given his book at 19 and I still didn't understand it. So there's a lot of work for us all to work through here. I couldn't even read at 8, so there you are. New York is also home to the two great writers who are the namesakes of tonight's award. Walt Whitman, the great American poet of democracy, and Edith Wharton, the great chronicler of the Gilded Age. And now it gives me great pleasure to bestow the Edith Wharton Citation of Merit in Fiction on our new state author, Ayad Akhtar. Let's give him a round of applause. It's simply a pleasure to add to the heaps of prizes and extraordinary praises that he has already received. Ayad Akhtar, a Pakistani American, a Muslim American, brings a new and original voice and shines a new light upon the American immigrant experience. Born on Staten Island, at the very threshold of New York Harbor, the great gateway to America, Ayad rearticulates the meaning of America, the allure of the American dream, the cost of success and failure, the abandonment and reaffirmation of identities, the clash and blending of cultures, our seeming inability to get along with one another, and our never-ending quest to create, quote, a more perfect union of the people in this nation. We welcome his extraordinary work, both for the stage and for the page. Here in this state that is often the first foothold for our new immigrants, a state built by immigrants, shaped by immigrants, and enriched by immigrants, and by indigenous peoples, of course. It is also an honor to celebrate his work here at the University of Albany, my alma mater, one of the most diverse Tier 1 research universities in the nation, with students representing over 90 nationalities and 100 languages. We celebrate Ayad's bold and provocative work for theater, and his role as a champion for the importance of live theater at a time in history when anything live, any experience like listening to me with our fellow human beings unmediated by electronic devices feels like a miracle, a celebration of reality, and a reaffirmation of the human connection and human existence. And we celebrate Ayad's fiction, which brings to the power of live theater to the printed page, the palpable and immediate presence of another person's voice and thoughts, reaching us through a book or an e-reading device, or the sound of an audiobook penetrating our souls. Like Edith Wharton, Ayad paints a panorama of the turbulent social, political, and economic forces of his own Gilded Age, and exposes the dark side of American success in ways that are both grand and intimate. The sheer originality of his fiction embodies Edith Wharton's declaration in her book, The Writing of Fiction, that quote, "True originality consists in not in a new manner of writing, but in a new vision." Ayad's life's work also embodies the mandate of the New York State Writers Institute to, quote, "increase the freedom of the artistic imagination." Indeed, as the president of American Pen, he has committed himself to leading an organization that is pledged to protect and advance the freedom of the artistic imagination, both here and abroad. It is therefore fitting to present Ayad Akhtar with the Edith Wharton Citation of Merit in Fiction as the state author of New York for 2021 to 2023. I would like to direct your attention to the table in the center of the stage, where you will see an etched crystal book prize and a formal proclamation from Governor Kathy Hochul. The award also comes with a $10,000 check from the state of New York. Now, please join me in welcoming to the stage our New York State author, Ayad Akhtar.
Yeah. Thank you very much. This is a surprising and terrific and really exceptional honor. And my partner, Annika, who's in the second row, and I moved upstate 2 years ago. So we live not too far in Kinderhook, and it's a particular thrill in a, as she said recently to me, in a book about contested belonging in America, in which the narrator is not always clear where he belongs. New York State has clearly said they feel like you belong here. So thank you so much. I'm going to read from Homeland Elegies. It has a different cover and hardcover. And there's some off-color language for anyone who is expecting a warning. So, context is from early in the book, which is a novel, clearly, to me, but to everybody else is not. And maybe I should have paid better attention when I named the narrator, gave the narrator my own name, that maybe they would think I had written a memoir. But the narrator has my name, many of the facts of my life, but as in some of the other great autofiction and self-referential fiction, from Proust to Philip Roth, a lot of it is made up. Some of it isn't. In the first chapter of the book, my father, quote unquote, who was a very famous cardiologist, electrophysiologist, the rhythms of the heart, was a doctor to many famous people, and in the first chapter, briefly in the 90s, is a doctor to Donald Trump, who, because there are some rhythm issues that Mr. Trump at that time is having, the EKG scans get sent to my father's lab in Milwaukee. And when my father, who is in the process of discovering what at that point was not quite fully yet known as what was called Brugada syndrome, there's suspicion that perhaps Mr. Trump has Brugada syndrome. So my father starts going to New York City to examine him at a lab at Mount Sinai. Over time, it becomes clear that, well, actually, I don't need to give you any more context. So he goes to New York, he's spending time in New York, he's treating Trump, and here we go. It would take years to get to the bottom of Trump's malady. Though father still thought Brugada was possible, he wasn't sure. There was little margin for error. Brugada, untreated, was usually fatal. But the only treatment was an implanted defibrillator, which Trump didn't want unless father was absolutely certain it was necessary. Father couldn't give him that assurance, and for the shark fin form characteristic of Brugada hadn't recurred on any of the Holter monitor strips or during the biannual exams Trump flew father to New York to perform. There were no further fainting episodes, though Trump did continue to report feeling that strange empty rattling in his chest from time to time. He would feel it, get winded, then sit down and wait for it to pass. Certain that these were incidences of arrhythmia, but perhaps not of the Brugada variety, father prescribed a mild beta blocker and a daily hydrating regimen for 4 years. These seemed to keep the troubling symptoms at bay. By 1997, innovations in gene testing made it possible to know for certain that Trump did not have the life-threatening heart condition that his earliest EKG strips had been thought to reveal. With the diagnosis of Brugada off the table, the rationale for father's trips was gone. The visits stopped. Trump never called again. In truth, father never had all that much FaceTime with the man outside the exam room at Mount Sinai. Apart from the morning heart tests, there'd been the occasional lunch or dinner, the comped suite at the plaza, one trip to Atlantic City where he sat at a baccarat table and lost $5,000 in 10 minutes while Trump looked on over his shoulder. It wasn't reasonable for father to feel as close to Trump as he did, but such things are rarely reasonable. Father went into a kind of withdrawal, mourning, really. The simple mention of Trump's name on the nightly news or in the daily paper could conjure his gloom and send him into brooding silence. Eventually, though, the trips to New York resumed. Under the pretext of attending some or other medical conference with only the most tangential connection to his field, he would fly himself first class, book a room at the Plaza, have dinner at Fresco by Scoto, where he and Donald once slurped spaghetti and meatballs, head to a fitting at Greenfield Clothiers in Brooklyn, where Trump's suits were tailored and where the staff still referred to Father as Mr. Trump's doctor, and call the person I would later gather he missed even more than Trump himself, a hooker by the name of Caroline. I wouldn't learn of her existence until after my mother died. And when I did, I admit I was taken aback, not that he'd been unfaithful, but that he'd been paying for it. I grew up with the image of my father as an oversized Boy Scout, a feckless, if well-meaning puer aeternus, bumbling along on the force of his natural gifts. He was not, I'd have said, much interested in the seedier side of life. I was wrong. Father's first visit to a prostitute required little more in the way of goading than some, quote, locker room talk between procedures one afternoon, which had Trump waxing jubilant about the surpassing solaces of professional sex. Noting Father's saucer-eyed interest and divining his lack of experience, Trump gave him a number. I don't doubt Father probably hung up a few times before he replied to what I imagine was a silken greeting on the other end of the line, a madam's voice at a private club in the East 40s, a brownstone not far from the UN, where on the second floor, Father picked his poison, a petite, buxom blonde with a long face, who Trump, too, had apparently, quote, known, and who was reputed to have a mouth of velvet. Father fucked Caroline for 15 years, exclusively, I would later gather, aside from my mother, of course. I would learn of her existence when I discovered that I had a half-sister in Queens, though this is not the moment for that Pirandellian tale. Suffice it to say, Trump's faux largesse, or rather Father's longing to live in the tawdry guilt and gossamer penumbra that masqueraded as largesse, this has had an outsized effect on the Akhtar family, and it accounts for something no one understands. My father supported Trump's election, and he supported him well past the point that any rational non-white American, let alone sometime immigrant, could possibly have justified to himself or anyone else. And yes, the blow-by-blow of Father's enthrallment with candidate Trump, first nascent, then ascendant, then euphoric, then disappointed, then betrayed and confused, finally exhausted, a gamut of intensities whose order and range are proper to the ambit of all addiction. Yes, a granular account of Father's addiction, his ceaselessly shifting emotions, his evasions and avowals and disavowals, the steady shedding of his civility, the daily obsession, the ad hoc rationalizations. All of this might be of value to note, to show, and in the process, through this unlikeliest of American Muslim lenses, to reveal the full extent of the terrifying lust for unreality that has engulfed us all. Yes, it might be of value, but I don't know that I can bear to pen it. I love my dad. I think he's a good man. I can't bear to invest a writer's weeks and months, let alone years, on a portrait of my father as menacing dolt. And so an afternoon's glancing views will have to do, to wit, a breakfast place in Waukesha where we were the only non-whites enjoying brunch the weekend after Trump entered the race with his infamous remarks about Mexican immigrants being rapists and murderers. I don't know what you're so worked up about. He's a showman. He's drawing attention. He doesn't really mean it. Then he shouldn't say it. You're not a politician. Neither is he. That remains to be seen. You're not telling me you think this is a good idea. To which Father didn't respond, only gestured at the busboys in their Mexican football team jerseys. Anyway, these people need to learn English. And his avid mounting glee during the primary debates as Trump insulted the other candidates. Look at them, wax dummies, everyone, empty suits, empty words. They deserve every bit. He's saying what everybody already thinks. And Trump's proposal for a Muslim database, for which oddly Father didn't believe he would have to register. I don't pray, I don't fast, I'm basically not Muslim. You're the same, he's not talking about us. Anyway, I was his doctor, so we don't have anything to worry about. And the mental contortions he performed to make sense of Trump's nonsense, which made me wonder if he was going senile. Everybody says, everything he says about the media is right. It's rigged. Rigged to make money, think about it. They don't report news, they sell it. And what do you think they're selling? that Donald can't win, that he won't win. But the more votes he gets, the more that story isn't true. Everybody knows this is a lie. He's rising. They're trying to keep him down. He's a fighter. You know what a fighter does? He fights. That's why we love him. Huh? And the eruption of bigoted views I'd never known he'd espoused. That whites were lazy and all they really cared about were their weekends away and their summer vacations. That blacks didn't like to pay their medical bills because they still had a slave's mentality and saw the system as a master to be rebelled against. That women had a deeper understanding of life because they had to give birth and were built to suffer, which is why they also wouldn't care that Trump said nasty things about them. They ultimately expected it. That Muslims were backward because the Quran was nonsense and the prophet was a moron. That Jews were neurotic because their fathers didn't know how to shut their wives up, so the mothers drove the children crazy. And that's just what I remember without having to actually think about it too much. For a thoughtful man, at least one who'd evidenced instances of thoughtfulness with reassuring frequency over the years, the man seemed to be turning into an imbecile. His hodgepodge views like mental flatulence, one fetid odor after the other. Puerile pleasures. That's what father was learning again. We all were. And Trump was our tutor. I really can't imagine that my father, this man I know and love, whom I still admire in so many ways, I can't imagine he didn't sense something was amiss. But somehow he just kept looking the other way, seeking some worthwhile reason for the widespread abasement. Like others, father started to wonder if this coarsening of our national life might not be a liberation, a required caustic, the dawn of some new era of political truth-telling. Even during the unfathomable October of 2016, which saw the release of both the pussy-grabbing audio and Comey's letter to Congress, weeks that cemented our status as the world's laughingstock, even by late October, when father's faith in the man appeared finally to be faltering, tempered by Trump's unremitting intemperance, the haplessness, the evident bad faith, the disgusting comments about women and their genitalia, even as late as a week before the election, I remember him telling me on the phone that Trump, flawed as he was, might still be the better choice. I couldn't bear it. Dad, I don't understand. I mean, what do you keep looking for in this guy? He's a liar. He's a liar and a bigot. He's incompetent. He's not really a bigot. Well, he's got everyone fooled. I don't understand what you see in him. I told you before, he's a wrecking ball. You were on Facebook and you read some letter some kid wrote his teacher. I read that too. Made sense, didn't it? Dad, you're not some coal miner's son from West Virginia or wherever the fuck that kid was. Language, beta, you need to calm down. I'll calm down when I understand why you don't care that this guy who is going to make our lives miserable if he's president, why that doesn't matter to you. It's not real. It's all bluster. How do you know that? You know how I know him. You haven't spoken to him for 20 years, 18. And would you calm down? You're counting? He's looking for attention. That's all. They're saying he wants to start a new television channel. Just answer me this, Dad. Just one thing, just one. Doesn't it matter to you that your children might be affected? You'll be fine. Your sister in Atlanta, the aunties, the cousins, relax. No, Dad, I want to know what you think. I know you don't think you'll have to sign up for a registry. There'll be no registry, you'll see. What about the travel ban that he's talking about? What about when Mustafa and Yasmin can't get on a plane to see us anymore? I said relax. And after that, what comes next? How much longer before they tell you you're not a real citizen because you weren't born here? Not happening. Or me because I'm the son of someone who they decide should never have been given citizenship. You're famous, nobody's gonna do anything to you. I'm not famous. You're in the paper all the time. Being in the paper in Milwaukee does not make me famous, and I don't see what that has to do with anything. Besides, he's not going to win. Besides, you're smart enough to know that he doesn't even want to win. He's trying to send a message. I thought you said he was trying to start a channel. Same thing. He's running for an election he doesn't want to win so he can start a channel to send a message. Exactly. What's the message? The system is broken. The maddening thing about this sludge of self-involved sophistry was that it all made perfect sense to him. I have no idea what you're saying, Dad. I'm saying he won't win, so you should calm down. And how do you know that? Nate Silver. What if he does? He won't. What if he does? I mean, you're still saying he's the better choice. He is. Better how? Lower taxes. You have got to be kidding me. If you made more money, you would understand. I made more than you did last year. It's about time. It sounds like you're going to vote for him. He paused. No. Sounds like you are, and I got to say, I still don't understand what your problem is with Hillary. No problem. We need a change. Is it that she's a woman? I mean, she can't get pregnant anymore, so that shouldn't be a problem for you. I don't like your tone. What would Mom say if she was here? About what? How do you think she would how do you think she would feel about having her pussy grabbed too? Out of bounds. Is that how Caroline liked it? Did she love it when you grabbed her pussy, Dad? You're not talking to me like that, goddammit. Do you hear me? I am still your father. My heart was pounding. He was right. I crossed the line. I was in pain. I was trying to hurt him. I hated what was happening to him, to the country, to me. I wanted to tell him I was sorry, that it hadn't been me speaking, not really, that this is what Trump was doing to all of us. But I didn't. I knew he wouldn't understand. Thank you.
Hey, Ed Akhtar, the book is for sale too. That is a hot book. You're gonna want to be signing them afterwards. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the stage for our next award. Oh, here we go. Excuse me. Chancellor Malatras.
We all felt like you during that election for sure. We're all traumatized still, but it's over, hopefully. And now it gives me great pleasure to present the Walt Whitman Citation of Merit to our new state poet, Willie Perdomo. It's a pleasure to welcome him to the stage because he has lit up so many other stages with the brilliance of his slam poetry performances, both here in New York and throughout the nation. Willie Perdomo is a major voice in the Nuyorican experience. Is that okay, President Rodriguez? Thank you. He helped me with the Nuyorican thing, so thank you, President Rodriguez. The Afro-Latino diaspora, the poet who fuses and pays homage to some of the great Black and Latino cultural movements of modern times, slam poetry, hip-hop lyrical traditions, and the exuberance of the Harlem Renaissance. He keeps alive and breathes new life into these great artistic traditions, all of them native to the streets of New York, art forms that have won the hearts and minds of young people on every continent, that have forged new languages, new forms of expression and self-assertion, of self-affirmation, and that have been translated into hundreds of dialects throughout the earth. A son of East Harlem, Spanish Harlem, Willie sings his childhood neighborhood into existence, its joys and its pains, its challenges and its triumphs. He celebrates a neighborhood of American dreams, dreams fulfilled and dreams denied, and dreams that represent our nation's great potential and its best hopes. He celebrates its linguistic complexity and wrestles new meaning from it, its interpenetration of Spanish and English, its jubilant mixing of cultures and races, its rich music, its drum beats, rhythms, and vocals. His work puts East Harlem where it belongs, where all ethnic and immigrant neighborhoods belong, at the very center of the American experience. And he makes this part of our experience, everyone's experience. In his own words, he strives, quote, to be universal without having to sacrifice the power of that East Harlem idiom. As an educator, writer of books for children, a mentor and publisher of emerging poets and poets of color, he encourages young people to be true to themselves, to express who they are, to speak truth to power, to speak up about injustice in our communities of color, and to have the courage to use words to promote social change. His poetry and his teaching embody the wisdom of Langston Hughes, who said, "An artist must be free to choose what he does, certainly, but he must also never to be afraid to do what he might choose." As the epigraph to his collection, The Crazy Bunch, he takes a quote from Walt Whitman that calls upon us to, quote, to be our own, to be electric, fresh. Because of these accomplishments, because he carries the tradition of Walt Whitman and Langston Hughes into the new age, it is entirely fitting to present Willie Perdomo with the Walt Whitman Citation of Merit in Poetry as the State Poet of New York. I would like to direct your attention to the table in the center of the stage, where you will see an etched crystal book prize and a formal proclamation from Governor Kathy Hochul. Your award, Willie, also comes with a $10,000 check from the state of New York. Now, please join me in welcoming to the stage our New York State poet, Willie Perdomo.
So I'm looking at a picture of myself on this screen, and it's kind of weird looking at myself and sort of, I can't believe I'm here right now, right? So it's a trip. And then I'm looking at the proclamation and I'm thinking, oh, wow, it's official. Like, it's really official. It's stamped, sealed, and official right now. I'm state poet in New York. It's interesting that the chancellor mentions, I think, slam poetry, because I think the last time I actually slammed was 1991. And it's been so far from my writing experience, but it is sort of where I come from. So you can't sort of deny where you come from in that respect. I have a few remarks before I read a poem from a book called The Crazy Bunch. Smoking Lovely is sort of a reissued and revisited book, and a book that had to be sort of seen again. But tonight I'm going to read from a book called The Crazy Bunch before I make my remarks. When I was invited, initially I was invited to do a reading, and Mark sent me a note and says, we want you to come up here and do a reading for the Institute. And I said, yeah, sure, that sounds great. About a month later, he says, there's been a change of plans. You've just been selected New York State Poet. So we'll have to cancel the reading, and you have some new responsibilities ahead at this point. So my response was basically the same response I have when I'm in front of something sublime or horrific or surprising or funny, or I just basically told my wife, I said, oh shit, babe, I'm New York State Poet. Now, if you tell, say, a bricklayer that you're a poet, more often than not, they'll actually ask you, what is it you actually do for a living? And I say this because I remember Amiri Baraka saying one time, he says, are you a poet? He says, yeah, okay. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go down to the nearest construction site, and I want you to read a poem. And if you come back without a brick being laid upon your head, then you have a career. So I said, okay, cool. I'm not saying that I didn't know laureates or state poets, but I suppose laureates come and go and poets are here to stay. Mark told me that I had to do 3 readings in some non-traditional venues. So I said, maybe I can give a reading in a hallway, a rooftop, a community center, a stoop, a community garden, or a barbershop. All the places where I found my languages, where I found what Amy Tan called her Englishes, what Dante called his vernacular, all the places where I received my letters to a young poet, outside of the classroom, far from an MFA workshop, not to decry the formal structures, because I've let more than one library book fall on my head, but I really found poetry in the street. Whether we're touched by love or not, we become poets when we see a new, fresh, and as Walt Whitman declared, when we choose to truly exercise our democracy and be electric, or if you are part of the native tongue tradition, where we would say, where you would be funky, funky, fresh with the funky, funky style. If you hashtag poetry on any social media platform, you get a hedge fund full of hits. Most people, when they hear the word poetry, will look for the nearest exit sign. You have a few here, but when I came about in the spoken word movement, that's when you started to see poets actually running toward the fire. What I'm saying is that to poet or not to poet, to spit or not to spit, and when I say spit, that's another word for actually reading poems out loud. You will find death or love on any street corner. After the news, I wondered Is it me that's being awarded, or everyone that had a hand in me becoming a poet? I wondered how to be a state poet during the time of vicious economic disparity, in the middle of a global pandemic, a fear-based world, how to be a poet amongst the hundreds of thousands of bodies and human beings, my beloved mother among them, that the virus and its variants claimed, how to be a state poet in the zoomosphere, how to be a state poet during a precedented same old renewed moment of anti-Black, anti-Latinx, anti-Asian, anti-trans violence, how to be a state poet when the parts of the world are melting in temperatures that feel like a candle burning at both ends, how to pursue truth and beauty in a moment that the writer Imani Perry calls the terror of now. Sometimes a poet will stand up when you can't. I knew that I was a state poet about a month before that it was announced. The only person in the world that knew besides me was my partner and wife, Sandra. When we sat down for dinner, for salmon and plátano, she would tease me and say, "I'm eating rice and beans with the state poet in New York. I'm watching a film with the state poet in New York. I'm holding hands with the state poet of New York." And she go on and on and on and tease me. I was basically suspended with the news in a moment where every living and dead thing was worthy of a post. New boo, dead cat, passed aunt, finalist for this and award for that, new job, new appointment, another day living. When the New York State Writers Institute announcement went live, I posted on Instagram and Facebook. What I posted moved some of my poet homies to the extent that they say, "Yo, that choked me up. Hope it makes it into your remarks when you assume the position." I posted a video of me dancing to Ray Barretto's New York Soul. You have to understand why I'm dancing. I'm in a rich dream space right now, which is to say that I'm thinking about all the poets who were poets and didn't even know it. I'm thinking about the windows and the stoops. I'm thinking about the hallways and rooftops and night pools and benches and those corners where I spent nights waiting for dreams, looking for family and chasing dragons. I'm thinking about the New York Public Library on 125th Street in Harlem, the Aguilar branch on 110th Street where I would spend hours looking for myself. I've been writing since I was a student at French Seminary, Ithaca College, City College of New York, and LIU Brooklyn. Yes, I tried to go to school a couple of times and finally ended up getting my BA and MFA from LIU Brooklyn. It starts on 122nd Street and Lexington Avenue in East Harlem. It starts with the open mics and coffee shops, salons, and community centers, conferences, symposiums, and early slams. But where does it really start? It starts with my mother, Carmen I. Perdomo, que descansa en paz, who kept journals and loved to read novels by Donald Goines and Jackie Collins. It starts at the New Rican Poets Cafe, where I started my out loud poet life. It starts with Ed Randolph, the mad poet of Harlem, who told me that I had to run with the good shit. It starts with the day I appeared at Marie D. Brown's doorstep looking for a job as an assistant to a literary agent. It starts with Piri Tomas, who opened the window to the streets. It starts with Raymond R. Patterson, blues poet, City College of New York professor, who sent me several letters, one in which he suggested that in order to grow as a poet, as a human being, sometimes you have to write in the dark. I wrote my first book from the corner of 123rd Street and Lexington Avenue in what is commonly known as Spanish Harlem or El Barrio. That is neither hyperbole or fantasy. The city has always been a character in my work, and if you know this state poet, you know he's been always true to this uptown heart. You know that with every book, a poet has a listener, a reader, a silent partner, a crimey, someone who is complicit in the making of something new, someone who is from your neighborhood. So it's only right that I stand up and salute the crazy bunch, the Stairwell Crew, Capicu Culture, the Títere Poets, the Dark Room Collective, Cabe Canum, Tanto Mundo, Kundiman, Vona, and all the native tongues practicing all their Englishes. But especially to all my non-poet homies back on the block who said, "Bro, I know what it means to live forever now." Thank you. What you should know tonight is that I used to be the poet in the crew. Now I'm the poet of the state. Call me Papo. Call me Walt. From every town and corner, from every homeroom and detention center, from every cell block and encounter group, every voting booth and vaccination appointment, call me your poet who didn't even know it. You should know that the first time the percussionist Poncho Sanchez heard me talk, he said, "You're from that barrio, ain't you?" That is a world-class percussionist who heard my voice's signature. That's your state poet tonight. Uptown, baby, uptown. You shouldn't be surprised if you're ever hanging out with me uptown after midnight and someone yells, "Yo, Papo!" That's me. To all my homies hanging out in the corner in front of the store, holding down the spot and chilling, there's a poet amongst you. Believe that. I got you. This state poet's aesthetic is to improvise and study, galvanize and versify. We love as we hate. But in that moment of our freshness, when we invite you to the party to connect and say, drop a line, chip in. If you can feel, then it's real. Drop that poem. No one says you have to be a poet. I got you. And I just want to give a shout out to all the folks from the archipelago known as Puerto Rico and all the Puerto Ricans in the diaspora and the Afro-Boricuas in the diaspora who danced with me when they heard that I was a state poet and said, "Wepa, you have a new state poet." This poem is called Breaking Night. It's called From the Crazy Bunch. In this particular section, it happens toward the end of the book. By this point, they've already spent a weekend, and it's a coming of age story that sort of focuses on 5 young brothers from East Harlem who are Black and Puerto Rican. And they've already suffered some losses by this point in the form of death. So, but they still sort of try to find this moment of joy. It's called Breaking Night. And you see the gentleman, photographer, says, you know, you're in the line of poets who are also activists. And I looked at the list, and the one that sort of stuck out me was Audrey Lord. And the idea that we can never look at poetry as she said, as a luxury. Breaking Night. In that year of a shot to the head, where were you the first time you broke night? Oh, I should say, when you break night, that means you've been up all night and you've done seen the sun come up. So, breaking night. In that year of a shot to the head, where were you the first time you broke night? When you break night, you learn that one puff under the right circumstance can give you the right perspective. You learn to pick up stories that fall and slip on the right side of knowing. What is it, a blizzard? That was a summer riff, should you be confronted with the choice of fight or fun. The call from the rooftop used to be boom, bella, boom, and the sky would go back to its specific blue places. The block wakes to sun and skeleton. You could talk to God for free. Water bread swan dived off groggy trucks, and your soul begged for the breakfast special. Bodega gates slammed down, open like start guns, and that's when you try to predict the future. A formal wind is all we needed to keep cool. On that Sunday sunrise, we laughed because we saw the light for the first time, the light that breaks bread, the light the dead sing when it's time for that last surge. The rock doves atop the light posts cuckooed our direction home, always north, always uptown. There we were, still wearing our hallway hickeys, and someone had to pay for the Buddha tie, the brown suede valleys, and the party socks. Forget all those bubblegum chewing, the personal ain't political mornings. It was time to swim. One by one, we picked each other up until there was enough crew to stock a lineup. The park was already fired up with cauldrons of gandulas and asopao, all kinds of fricassee and long grain canilla served with the story of an uprising. Foils and forks, napkins and wipes, gizzards and tripe, the concept of an extended noon and learning how to feed someone with a long spoon. In the madrugada, we found a big beat, a homeostatic way of hanging out, spin styles and salvation. Word to my mother became our true signature. The math was easy that morning. We wanted to open spots where we could feel syncretic. Language, the old schoolers used to say, was a lemon running up the stairs, a piano plink, an uppercut, and a right cross. Ain't you something? You the same one, we like to say. Metro North rattles, more battles to be won, and part of the game was to be torn out of one's frame. Cherry blossoms caked on Marcus Garvey Park, and the M116 rumbled a tune of transfers straight out the depot. Get the sun in your life, son. You're my son because you shine, not because you're mine, son. We ran over the mountain, walked the line on a dead steam pipe like a Wallenda checkered. That's where all the favors go down. The ghost of nasty Rucker Park crossovers, a highlight reel of sucker turnovers, doing it in the dark, doing it in the park. Oh yeah. We could have been 6 feet under for all we knew. So we hopped the public pool gates and swam 400-meter relays in our soaked boxers. Created teams and heats, bets for next, and banged out beats, waiting for our legs. Homeroom and homecomings, study hall and scholastic had lost their appeal. Being cool, being real, crashing hooky sets, being rookied into gang divisions, the smell of sex and grown-up talk, that's what we knew of freedom. No regulations, no rules made to fit the latest trend, no rules to regulate the fool in us. That morning, all we wanted to find was a smile at the bottom of the world. Thank you.
If you appreciate our programming and would like to support the Writers Institute, you can find out how at nyswritersinstitute.org.